Hey everybody, it's Marty, the JavaScript party, and my buddy Rhett. This is actually, I didn't probably never mentioned it before. This is a special treat for Rhett because I only bring her in to this office during these shows. So basically, right before this, I do this video, I'll bring her in, and then as soon as I'm done, I'll carry her out. I'll take her back to her big cage, and then she spends the rest of her day in there. I was thinking about like how today is day 2 after daylight savings, and I do think that in my personal experience, the worst day of the year is probably the Friday after daylight savings, and then like probably the second worst day is probably the Wednesday, then the third worst day is the Tuesday, and then the Monday. But I think that Thursday after daylight savings is okay. It seems to be like a lot of people, but a lot of people just really fall apart on the Friday after daylight savings. And it's kind of funny because like Rhett doesn't is completely unaware of the time and all that, but it totally affects her life because we've shifted our life around daylight, even though we really don't need to. Like I get up hours and hours before work, and I don't really need to do that. I still do. And then what was weird is like yesterday I was sort of on edge all day long. Something was off, and weather was really bad, and daylight savings. So between those two things, it just sort of threw me off all day. And then I had school last night, and then after school, I went out to the living room to hang out and watch some Netflix and stuff like that. And um, like it was real hard to fall asleep, and I think it was because I was on edge all day. Like my body was just like, we're in an emergency situation. So you end up like kind of folding another issue on top of like having a harder time sleeping. Um, I do think that it's so important to be careful this week. This is probably the most important week of the year. Isn't that right, Rhett? For you to be careful because like you can do things damage this week from a personal like your job perspective, your personal health perspective, your family relationships perspectives, all of that stuff. You can damage that in such a way that it can ruin your whole year. So being careful this week is super important. So I definitely would say try really hard to realize that you're probably, if you're anything like me, you're not in your normal mindset, and it's a good idea to just sort of moderate everything you do. And think very strongly about possibly if you get like PTO and stuff, maybe Friday might be a really good day to take PTO, just to try to recover from daylight savings um, event. But anyway, so this is a good day. It is 8:18 a.m. I have to start work in 42 minutes, so I'm running a little later this today. I was up a little bit later last night, um, and yesterday was definitely a much harder day for me at work. Like I could not think as clearly as I normally can, and all that. Things that were easier were harder, things like that. But fortunately, I'm in a good place on this because all I need to do is run end-to-end tests before I do a commit. And because I made some changes. I can't even remember what the changes are. Um, I think we moved code. We moved a lot of the code that was inside of the component back out. So it's kind of like it all started off with the component, and then it went into the component, which then, because it made it into the component, it was really easy to have a bunch of these. It was trivial just to add a bunch of these. But then moved it back out of the component because the component was just doing too many things. It was just like the flexibility. I couldn't really easily change the different kinds of animations and stuff like that because all of that code was inside the component. When I pulled it back out, then I could make changes to individual pieces, but and all that. So basically, that's a good thing. But there's kind of one piece of work that isn't in there, and that's this animations. So that will be the next round. But this is a good time to do a commit, and that did break some unit tests. And getting unit tests working in general was much harder than I was expecting, But then right at the end there, I was like, oh man, I have this one really difficult task, and it ended up being really simple. And that was to create an element ref for the unit test to be able to work with. That ended up being trivial. Um, so I had made up a game plan, and I had identified what I thought was going to be the hard parts, and one of the hard parts ended up easy. So I ended up having a big win there. Um, so that was good. It a lot, how hard and how easy things are really just depends on how well architected things were ahead of time, and that happened to be an example of something that was really, really well thought out and really well architected by the Angular team. Um, and sometimes they do have things like that, and sometimes they don't. I think at this point, actually, it probably makes sense to look at my console and make sure I don't have any weird console logs in here. Yeah, I don't see anything. Let me hit a refresh real quick. Let's see what we got. All right, so now I want to run my end-to-end test, but I don't really remember exactly how to do it. So I'm going to look at my package.json file because that's where I set up my scripts to run it. And basically, it looks like I believe I like Cypress Open over Cypress Run. I believe Cypress Run, what that will do is that will run it sort of headless. So it'll run it in the back where I end up just with um, it tells me whether things are passed or not, and I think it even takes pictures of everything along the way, which would be really great in like a CI/CD sort of situation, because you could sort of you could write some code in there to execute this script maybe every hour on the hour and take pictures and report whether something passed or failed, and have pictures of it, and then you kind of have that to, like, let's say the next day you're like, it said everything passed, but for some reason we're getting this error reported, like something's not updating or something like that. You still have the pictures to go back and review. Or this thing said it failed. What does the picture look like? And that was actually okay. I see why it says it failed, but that was fine. So the picture would be really, really cool. But anyway, so it looks like I want to do an npx Cypress Open. So what I believe will happen when I do that is, or Cypress : open, is it will open an Electron application. And that Electron application will give me three choices. It'll give me a choice to test it like in Electron, which I believe would be against whatever version of Chrome that Electron was built with. It'll do it in, I think, Edge, or I think it'll do it in Chrome, in Google, whatever this thing is called. Whatever you call it. I can't even remember what this is called, but we will find out in a second. Sometimes I forget just the weirdest things. npm run. Fortunately, I've been like that my entire life, so I always said when I was young, don't forget that I've always been this way, because that not remembering weird names out of the blue is not going to be is not an indication of like Alzheimer's or anything like that, because I've always been that way, even when I was a young teenager. Is it called Chrome? Funny, that's so wild. So now it's popping up in Cypress, and I believe this right here, this whole thing is a Electron application. I believe I would love to get into Electron. So I want to do E2E testing. It is configured. I forgot about that step. Chrome. Oh, it is called Chrome. It's so weird because Chrome is like kind of also the name. A lot of times in a lot of places they'll name all the outside stuff, like all this kind of stuff, part of the Chrome. So I will start my E2E testing in Chrome. Now it took over my whole screen, so I'm going to make that smaller. All right, so I have two tests, home and viz. I believe both will pass at this point. So I made this test 9 weeks ago, and I made this one 2 weeks ago. So that's kind of a nice reminder of stuff. So now it's loading my home test, and it passed. And I think all it's doing is trying to find a canvas. Unfortunately at this point I'm not doing a great job of sort of showing off the abilities of Chrome. I guess it's specs. I always think it's runs that I want to go into. Okay, so this is also, and it passed. And I expected that. I don't think I'll be able to do anything with Chrome. I mean, with that's very fun in end-to-end testing until you can actually manually update and modify or add these things and modify them and change what kind of thing they are and change their animations and stuff like that. Think I think this is going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it, but all that. But anyways, this is awesome. I'm very happy with this. I like how you can mouse over. It kind of tells you what the steps were. Um, I do think that this would be a much unfortunate. So this, I love this. I love it. And I do think that like if I could ever get a job as a QA someplace, and I do think I would be a much better QA than developer if I'm being completely honest, because um, I think that I know this is going to sound really bad, but I think that I move too fast as a developer. I get things done fast, and sort of as a developer, the people that are feeding you, like so the BAs, those people, they can only move at a certain pace, and then the people that are consuming, that's the QAs and all that, they can only move so fast. And if you're way more experienced than both of them, you'll end up moving faster. Now, I have worked in some places where they had like hundreds of QAs and hundreds of BAs and only a few developers. And in those situations, I was a much more productive individual. But the problem is that I could not get a deep enough understanding of anything because like literally, you know, I would be on one extraordinarily complex thing that some BAs have been working on for a year. I would work on it for a week, and then it would go to QA, and maybe QA would spend like a month QAing it. The way the place was set up, it was maybe like 6 8 weeks before something that you were QAing made it all the way to production. Um, and at any given time, I had like 8 or 9 things that were in QA, and I was trying to absorb a whole new thing. I was trying to maintain 8 or 9 things and all that. It just became way too much. But one place I was a QA. It was the only QA position I ever had, and they actually tried to promote me into like a lead position as a QA. But and I was so stupid. I should have taken that. I don't. Sometimes you just when you're too close to issues. I was like in my late 40s, I think, and I just wasn't ready to become a QA yet. I felt like I would end up as a QA or a BA at some point, but I just wasn't quite ready to give up being a developer. And so I was just fighting and fighting to stay as a developer. But in that QA position, basically my job was there was all these different systems, like literally dozens of different systems, and they were like coming online. And my job was to write code. My job was to test these come online. So I built like a really cool testing system. Had like all these little squares, and you could connect the dots, and then you could double click on it, and you could schedule it to run, and it would run anytime you wanted to run, and it would go and it would retrieve tokens to log into things, and it would log into things. And some of these things, like you would log in, and then maybe an hour later you would actually get a token to do something, and then you'd do it, and then you go in and do something, and then you would expect certain results. Maybe even the next day, maybe 2 days later, you expect it to show up in some database that was like, uh, you know, some deep freeze database, and my system could uh, what do you call it? Orchestrate all of that kind of thing. It was just really really awesome system for that. Um, and so I was able, basically as a QA, I was sort of supporting like a couple dozen systems, and then I had built a framework that would test all those systems. And but I was just so fixated on being a developer. I'm a developer. Um, so I don't know. It'd be interesting. It would be great if I could get some sort of position like that again. But you don't know. You don't know what you give up until it's gone. So I think now, unlike unit tests, I think I can just kill this. and it stops itself. That's one of the things I don't like about the unit test. But it does look like we are ready to commit everything in. What time is it? It is March 11th, 8:30, and it is absolutely beautiful outside. I am kind of sleepy, but it's gonna be very interesting to see what this afternoon is like. Plus, I have this many new cards to go through and understand about paralegal, which, oh man, I cannot believe how many massive things I just didn't understand about bankruptcy before this course. And then these are the cards that I already made, and I have one more. But in this next test, I have one more like session with the professor where they're going to go over things. So I'm going to have to make cards off of that. And I have 2 more chapters. I've done 1 chapter. I have 2 more chapters in my book on that. So it's been a long time since I've been a student. I remember I used to do this with 4 classes at one time, 4 engineering courses at one time. And I would have thousands, tens of thousands of different cards that I was constantly just memorizing and all that. And it was absolutely incredible because I could memorize these cards, take the test in 3 weeks, and then literally dump all that knowledge and start a new set of cards. And then I would keep all those cards, and then the end of the school year or the end of the semester would come, and I would literally have 20, 30,000 cards, and then I would just burn them all up. And that was those were the days. That was hard though. That was so hard, and to get through engineering school that way. It was sort of a brute force method. But anyway, so let's 8:30. Oh, so I have 28 minutes before work. Let me just look. I'm not actually going to check this in, but let's look at our changes. So yeah, so we added, looks like so it looks like we added one service as part of this effort called visualization service. And yeah, I remember that. That was because basically, even with pulling everything out of the component, we still ended up with too much logic happening within the component itself, which made it really, which was exposed by the unit test. So that was a good thing. I'm really glad about that. And it is like a one-time learning sort of experience. I've always been sort of a 50-50 on the fence on whether you should have like a little companion service for a component. And at this point, I'm completely sold. That is definitely a change to my mindset. Now, if I went and worked at a place and I try that, and there's a good chance that I'll end up going to war with a new, young, hotshot developer that just doesn't believe in that for whatever reason. So, that would be this. Okay, so I don't really like this, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. Basically, we have a really, really stupid masonry behavior. All it knows is how to take its app, figure out what its position is, and add 130 pixels to it. But that's good enough. But basically, this whole thing, this entire behavior of left and top and all that, probably needs to be outsourced to an entire system that does nothing but figure out how all these things are supposed to be laid out. And actually, it's going to be a lot of fun to build that. It is not easy. It sounds easy. Super hard. I don't think anyone's ever really come up with a really good masonry scheme. There's tons of them out there, and every one of them kind of it's got problems that I've ever tried. And then trying to do upgrades if you use an Angular specific one sometimes gets ruined by you can't do the upgrade because the masonry system is not upgradable. App components. So this is where we moved all the code back in here. What I'm really looking for, see, this should all just be gone. Be gone. Everything from here should be replaced with some sort of calls to functions after this next iteration. And then service. Okay, so this is where, I guess this is a whole brand new thing. This is our visualization service spec. So just test that. And this is actually our new visualization. and it's render in native element. I think this function is a really good name, though I don't know, it's awkward, but that's what it does. It renders it in the native element and then element ref. I probably should have called this, no, what I should do is name a variable native element, because the native element is, well, it's already named native element though. So this is really the whole thing of this name, render in, and then the ID is, so maybe it should be render visualization in native element, but since the name of the whole service is visualization, I guess it doesn't, it's not really necessary, because if you think about how we're going to use it, it's going to be visualization service dot render in native element. So since it's a visualization service, I guess like in, I think in our language we have in the American English, and I don't know if it's like this in all versions of English, but in American English we're what's called tail-ended. So that means like a jet fighter is a kind of person that fights real fast, and a fighter jet is a kind of jet that is for fighting. Like the last word is the most important thing. So let's see, visualization service render in element, in native element. I think that fits in quite nicely with our language. Now, I think that that would be really, really awkward for someone who speaks Spanish, and not New Mexico Spanglish. That is what is so fun about New Mexico Spanglish is New Mexico Spanglish is tail-ended like English. So it's mostly Spanish words, but there's a few English words topped in there, and everyone thinks it's the inclusion of those English words, Germanic words, that make it Spanglish. But what makes it Spanglish is the fact that it ends, that it's tail-ended, um, and and it's really fun to listen to. But anyways, the it would this the way this names is would be weird. And I remember once working with a team from the Dominican Republic, and they were Spanish speakers by nature. And man, the American developers and the Spanish developers had such a hard time making variable names and function names and all that that were not just really confusing, because they're like, they will be like, the way they would say is like a house of green, but we would say a greenhouse. And so they would write their methods and their function names and all that and their variable names with the concept of the last word being like the descriptive word and the first word being like what it is. And then we would write everything the opposite. And oh man, it just led to massive confusion in the code. The code was extraordinarily confusing to read. And then it was a finance thing. And finance, the whole finance industry, they have an entirely different vocabulary that is completely based on the words that we use in regular day-to-day common English, but has different meanings. So that was so crazy. And then one of the things about finance is, I think the most important thing in a finance, the foundational thing, the guts that you have, the basic thing of finance is hiding information from different groups. So like in a finance application, you don't want the finance manager knowing how much money the owner of the company has. But you do want to know if you do want the owner of the company to know if they're going to bounce a check if they write it too much. And so trying to build that into software where people don't know, everything's hidden, is just really, really hard. And then like another thing that like a lot of times the owner of the organization will be getting like a special bonus if something is paid early or something like that, but they don't really want the workers to know that there's going to be this special bonus that goes out. They just want to have that bonus for themselves. And then the thing is so then you have to write code that sort of encourages the people that are doing the day-to-day work to pay early, but doesn't tell them why. So yeah, that, and then you have the language issues, and yeah, you mix all that together, and you have different linguistic ways of doing things, and yeah, that's how you end up with code that makes no sense at all. Anyways, here's my unit tests. Woohoo! Yeah. Okay. So I will say that I am still on the fence on unit tests, whether they should be done or not. I definitely think that it is totally, at this point, I think that there are some environments where unit tests make a lot of sense. There's some environments where 100% test coverage makes a lot of sense. There's some environments where no unit test makes sense at all. And there's some environments where like 10% makes sense, and other environments where like maybe 70 or 80% makes sense. It just depends on all kinds of factors that are just beyond me right now. I just can't quite do it. So this is probably the most important one that I need, that I'm likely to have some stuff that I don't want in here. And that is this. Oh, no. No, that's not true. It was this one that was probably. So, yeah, so I think this is good. It's red. Most of the logic has been removed from this. I think, let's see if we go into the actual file itself. There's very, very little logic in this file. I don't know. Do we need render service anymore? Or I don't know that we need these anymore. We need our new component visualization service. I like that name a lot. Yeah, so we don't need that. We don't need 3 anymore. Doesn't look like we need any of this anymore. Yeah, that is just so much. I think that this is better. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I do think my gut tells me that this is much better. I want separation between that and that. I want separation between that and that. Yeah, I think this looks a lot better. Basically, all it knows, its only job is to know when this is available. And right now, we can count on it being ng after ViewNet. I think there's a good chance that at some point it won't be available here, that I'll do some kind of change to the code that will make that this doesn't work. And then what will happen is if that happens, then what will happen is the unit test should drop below 100%. They won't fail, but they should drop below 100%. And then we'll know, oh, okay, this isn't. We'll also know because there won't be any items rendered, but that may not mean anything because, you know what? I don't think we'll ever have this problem, because I think what will happen is these will be gone. We'll hit this button. This will get built. And it's possible that once however we set that up where these are getting built, it is possible that the view init may end up coming before this native, might get executed before this native element has been created. And if that happens, then, and there's a very good chance that there'll be an upgrade that does that. And if that happens, then this will drop below 100%. And then probably what we'll have to do is we'll have to go in a different hook. It'll probably be sort of like, there's another hook, I can't remember what it's called, that just runs over and over again every time the view is updated. And basically we'll just have to have like an initialization variable, and then it'll just run over and over again until it sees that the view child, the native element, is there. And then once it does, it'll mark itself as initialized, and it'll be done. Because all of the work of updating all this stuff happens in ThreeJS. It does not happen in the element. And that is very different than most Angular applications. So that is that. I guess there's no reason not to commit this. Git status. So we got our package. So I think as I look at this, everything is something I want. So I'm going to stage it. And this is going to be video 75. So git status. Everything is staged. Git commit -m. Video 75 moved logic out of the component. not logic in general, it's visualization. Logic is. Did I spell that right? Visualiz. This, you never get a chance to fix this. I don't think I've ever worked in a code base where I have not completely embarrassed myself, humiliated um, humiliated myself by having a misspelling, and there's no spell check. Um, but here we go. One last thought. Yeah, it looks good. Let's go ahead and push that. And everything is updated at GitHub. We have officially moved on to our next step will be to somehow deal with, I do that every time. Did not have that checked in. I did not have that committed. So, and let's look at that, make sure I didn't do anything too crazy. Yeah, all I did was delete stuff. So basically, I'm just going to do the exact same commit. Now, had I not pushed, I could have just undone that last commit and then added this in and all that. I cannot, that is a pattern. I do that all the time where I make the last bit of changes, I don't save them, and then I commit and push everything, and then I realize, oh crap, I didn't save anything. And I found that this, while it is not a good solution, is the best solution. And that's just have two commits with the exact same name, with one of them that just has the last bit of fixing. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, no question about it. But speaking of embarrassing, we had a question that we had to answer about like a hospital not providing care for people and blah, 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 blah. You know, it's like one of those things that, I don't know, we would call that clickbait, or I don't know, something trying to get everyone arguing with each other. And nobody had, this is my first paralegal class. There are people in there who this is their last, like they've done all the other 12 paralegal classes, and this is their last paralegal class, and I was the first one to actually post an answer. It's 10% of our grade. And the teacher that we had last, who was a substitute teacher, said that a large percentage of students never refuse to actually put stuff in there. And they give up 10%. They give up an entire letter grade just because they're too afraid to post stuff, which I think if you're doing legal stuff, you probably need to get over being afraid. But I felt really good. I just typed up. I figured it might be embarrassing. It might not. People may call me stupid. I might have done it completely wrong since I've never done it before. But compared to a PR, that's nothing. Absolutely nothing. So PRs are just absolutely the worst. The worst. Well, I have 12 minutes to start work, so I got to go put Red up and get my computer up. I got to go find my phone because I cannot log into work without my phone. We have this duo thing that we have to do, and I can't log in unless my phone is running. I generally turn my phone off every night, so I got to get it up and running. It takes an extra, and then like if it does, and then if you don't do it fast enough, then you have to log in twice, and yeah. Anyways, happy coding, everybody. Hang in there, guys. It's gonna be a rough week, everybody. Um, let's get this week out of the way, and next week will be a lot better. Try not to do anything this week that will affect next week, and that is easier said than done. But this week is just a rough week, and it's not just, even if it doesn't bother you at all, like even if you're just like you are completely unaffected by the change of time, it's gonna affects all the other people around you, so it does affect you. So even like Rhett, she doesn't care about time, but it's still affecting her. Anyways, happy coding all, everybody. Bye.